all you YouTube chess lovers, and thanks again for joining me on my chess TV channel here on YouTube. I'm Steven Sturgill, and we'll be looking today at the I'm about to say Zamish attack for White or King's Indian, but today actually I'm taking a little turn to the left, and we're going to be investigating the Bayonet attack. This was very infamous back in the 70s and 80s, and many grandmasters racked up wins, and if they had black pieces, suffered horrific losses, getting into very sharp attacking lines, opening black up. And it's interesting because part of any of the King's Indian system works to utilize the H pawn, obviously for an attack on the black king when he castles king side, which he does probably in like 98, 99% of all cases. Very few grandmasters play like Petrosian anymore, where they sometimes leave the king in the center literally the entire game. Uh, that can be done in a few systems, but you have to really know your theory and have great fortitude to kind of just suffer the mental anguish of leaving your king in the center for literally an entire game. So we're not looking at that today. We're just looking at a very aggressive bayonet attack. So here's, oops, okay, there we go. Knight f6, c4, black prepares fianchettoing the kingside bishop. And here, guys, wanted to see if this would work, so I played the immediate b4, not even caring what black plays here in the pawn center, which is pretty wild. And black responded with sort of a gambit style system, hoping that I take, and he takes back with the knight, and we get into sort of a wacky, I don't know what. It's kind of like it may still be a King's Indian, but it's going to feel a lot more like a weird English of some sort or something. So at any rate, I went ahead and closed my, I want to say pawn center, but it's just over one file. So my wonky left of center pawn center, and black played bishop g7, knight f3. And instead of castling, black thought it would be better to get the bishop out to f5, knight c3, knight e4, bishop b2, castles finally by black, and e3, fortifying the d4 pawn, and looks a little bit like a reverse French almost, as far as for white, with that beautiful pawn structure. Black played a5. I pushed. There's b5, which is not at all uncommon in the bayonet. Black plays knight d7, rook c1, which, by the way, I often feel c1 is the best square in most King's Indians for the rook. But certainly you could make a case that it comes down largely to the system that you're playing, the variation that you're playing, and preference. Often b1 is excellent for the rook, and as well sometimes d1 is a not at all bad square for the rook. But in general, I feel that c1 is offering you the most return on your rook investment. um, Knight df6, bishop d3. And again, in a lot of the King's Indians, we see this common theme of bishop to either d3 or e3, often coming back to e2 in some cases. And obviously, the other bishop may often be seen at e3 as well. Black pushes their pawn on a4, castles, bishop comes to g4, h3, asking black to please either take or move your bishop somewhere. He plays the very aggressive a3, asking me the same, and we back it up into a1. reminding me in some cases of some Grunfelds I've seen and also some other King's Indians. So not that unusual, not common, but not that bizarre by any stretch of the imagination. Black bishop finally goes to f5, knight e2, bishop h6, knight e5, and that is a very, very powerful square for that knight. As you can see, it has tremendous scope. Let me just borrow it for a second. Obviously, it can come here. I mean, I'm not saying it would come here now, but there's ideas eventually of either c6, f7, g6, g4 with a possible, idea of coming to h6, etc., etc. Okay, black plays e8, a good move for black. King h2, preparing obviously the rook to come to g1 at some point. Bishop goes to e6, g4. This is a very, very aggressive attack. Not at all uncommon in King's Indians, and especially the Zamish, the Smyslov, really all of the King's Indians for that matter. But we're seeing it here now in the Bayonet. Black knight goes from f6 to d7. Push f3, kicking the knight. Other knight exchanges on e5. Pawn takes, of course. Bishop takes the pawn on e3, and now that bishop is a little uncomfortable for white. It's not going to be so easy to dislodge it in a timely manner, but we'll see. So this was interesting because white, Komodo found that it's much better here to take this knight off and just give up the rook on c1. Not a comfortable move to make for white, and certainly not something that I think most players would find over the board very easily. I think it'd be much more natural, it would feel much more natural just to move the rook to, say, I don't know, c2 or b1. But this does have the benefit of largely opening the f-file. Bishop takes, queen takes. And what I do like about this position now is you can see white has this lush wide open diagonal to get the queen to h6. This knight could easily jump in at some point, maybe even sack itself on g6, or I don't know, or after pushing these pawns come to h5, or possibly even work to e6 at some point. And it goes without saying that this rook could do, there's a lot of ideas for this rook. It could at some point come here, g1, or what have you. Of course, yeah, and now black played a4, rook a4. Obviously pressurizing this pawn on e4 because it is under double attack. And of course, if this file comes open, well, I can take and just give up the bishop. Ow, that's not what I wanted to do. My point is, at some point, if black gets in some weird move, or white makes a mistake, then obviously that pawn, bishop on d3 may be hanging, so we need to exert some caution. Queen h6 anyway, avoiding all of that. And black thought it would be better to go back to a7. I guess just feeling that there wasn't enough in this position to really slow down the serious threats on the king side. So white takes d5, and black pushes f5, and we take en passant. e5 takes f6, black takes back, obviously with the pawn, rook takes, and this setup is looking very uncomfortable now for black. We've got these bishops trained on the h7, x-raying it rather. A1 is an absolute monster. I mean, this in some ways is the sleeping star of the show, this bishop on a1, but this is just a powerhouse. This is literally a living nightmare for black. I mean, I would never want black in this position. So what now? Well, queen takes rook is quite obvious. I hope you saw that. The problem is now bishop takes the queen, rook e7, gobble that guy up. And of course, this is a flat out resignable position, but rook goes to a8, gobble the pawn, queen check, king h8, and checkmate. Guys, that is checkmate in 31 moves against Komodo 8 for both sides. I'm telling you, this is a very, very dangerous attacking system. And that's the beautiful thing about the King's Indian, whether you play black or white. You don't have to worry about getting stuck in one tiny microscopic variation that if you go astray one move, you're dead. No, there's lots of rich thematic ideas and motifs in the King's Indian. And as we saw here, this was just a tremendous attack on black. Let's run through it again briefly. d4, knight f6, c4, g6, the immediate b4. Knight plays the immediate d5, hoping that we take. We're not going to take, we just push and lock up that pseudo center. Bishop g7, knight f3, bishop f5, knight c3, knight e4, bishop b2, castles, e3, a5, b5, knight d7, rook c1, knight dsx, bishop d3, a4, castles, bishop g4, h3, a3, bishop a1, bishop f5, knight e2, bishop h6, knight e5, rook e8, king h2, bishop e6, g4, knight d7, f3, knight exchange on e5, he takes e5, bishop takes e3, f takes e4, bishop takes c1, queen takes back, rook a4, queen h6, rook a7, e takes d5, f5, e takes f6 en passant, rook takes, queen takes, bishop takes queen, rook e7, bishop takes rook, rook a8, bishop takes g6, pawn takes back, queen check, king over, checkmate, bishop f6, game over, 31 moves. Now, we can go back and maybe look at a couple of micro variations here. For example, hold on. Yeah, instead of this move of pawn takes pawn, white also had the resource of going knight f4, and black responds d4. Knight exchanges on e6, and we talked about that move earlier about the potential of the knight working its way to e6. Indeed, this is quite possible. F takes, and the danger with f taking is that now there's a wide open f file. And let's see how white should proceed here. Bishop goes to c4. And that may not be obvious for beginners or low-rated players, but obviously it's targeting the weakness on e6. That doubled pawn is just sitting there totally unprotected. In fact, it's not even protectable, except queen going to c8. Okay, that would actually protect it, but then there's probably other tricks in the position. Queen goes to d7 instead. h4, working those g and h pawns. Rook comes to a4, hitting the bishop. We ignore that, and that's a ballsy move because you're just saying, I don't care if you take my bishop. I have a raging attack going on over here kingside. Black queen literally gives herself up, going to d6. It's weird how computers make these bizarre moves when they don't know what to do, because in this position, regardless of what black does, they're losing. It's just that simple. So c takes the queen back. C takes d6. Rook finally takes the bishop, but it's of course of very little merit at this point. D takes e7. That's also not maybe a easy move to see for a lower rated player, but it's very, very strong because it's clearing that square. It's absolutely pressurizing f8. Not to mention that if the rook takes here, black's dead instantly. As you can see, if rook takes, then rook f8, and it's game over, literally. So rook c2, check. King g3, rook g2 check. Well, you know when you see a move like that, you're very nearly checkmating your opponent. White takes back. G takes h5. Rook f8. And as you can see, even with the naked eye, you don't need an engine to see that it's game over, regardless of what black does here. It's truly and legitimately over. So rook takes, and it's however you want it here. You can make a new queen, or you can just
checkmate.
go there. Doesn't matter. So that's a gorgeous variation. A little bit longer, obviously, than 31, but at 34, it's not long at all. So let's back up to another fork in the road and see what else could have gone down briefly. Backing up to this part of the late middle game. Instead of this, black could have gone knight g5, and this kind of mucked it up a little bit for white. It by no means stops the attack, but it significantly slowed it. And now how should white proceed? Well, here we have h4, knight takes f3 check, rook takes back, bishop takes g4, rook g3, bishop d7, h5, bishop g7, e6, and that looks like another move that's at first glance tricky to understand what's going on, but let's look a little deeper as a first of all, it's a double attack because you are asking black, do you care more about your bishop on g7, or do you not care at all about this bishop on d7? So black's losing one of these ostensibly, and he has a choice to make. He can either take back this guy like so, and risk us taking his bishop, which is probably not a hot scenario. So on the other hand, I guess it's the best black could find in that position. So bishop takes the pawn, and instead of taking back, although that'd be a perfectly fine move, we're going to first further weaken black's pawn king side structure, that little cage around him that we need to break up or pry apart and get in there. So we're going to first sack the g pawn with our h pawn. H takes g6. Remember, you always want to capture towards the center in general. Knight f4, kicking the bishop. Bishop f5. Bishops come off. Well, you would have thought, but I guess black was so desperate here, not further wanting to weaken the pawn structure, that he plays this crafty, slightly wacky, en passant. Well, it's not en passant, but I mean it's throwing it out there to where it could be recaptured en passant. Not here, we don't have a pawn for that, but I mean it's rare to see a move like this late in the game, but it happens. So what should white do here? Well, we sack the knight with a very, very crafty move. Knight takes g6, f takes g6, bishop takes g6, now kicking the rook. Queen h4 check. We block with the rook. And notice the black queen is going to have to check on f2 because it no longer has the f4 resource to check with. So in fact, yes, f2 check. King h1. Now rook ad8. Bishop h7 check. King h8. Queen h5. What a glorious move that is. That is just pure money in the bank. Rook e7, desperately trying to strengthen the g7 square. Rook g1, and it's looking pretty bad for black. Queen takes g1 check, and we recapture obviously with the king. What else? Bishop f6. King goes back to h2, d4, Bishop c2, discovered check. King g8, Queen g6 check. King f8, Queen exchanges on f6, check. King e8, Rook h8 check. King d7, Bishop f5 check. Rook e6, and not queen here. A lot of us goober it up and we take with the queen, but that's not as strong here. Bishop takes is checkmate, and the function obviously is that the queen needed to stay here to lock down the e7 square for escape, and obviously the king can't get to the e8 square. Gorgeous. That's a gorgeous twist as well, and that would be mate in 43. Now if we go back further, I don't know, almost there. Yes, here black had an interesting sack idea. Knight takes g4 check. Knight takes back. Bishop g7. Oops, wait a minute. Sorry. No, I'm sorry. Bishop exchanged on g4 here, which is quite interesting. H takes g4. Knight f6. Rook g1. Bishop g5. f4. Bishop h4. g5. Bishop f2. And this is another keen move in the position, a keen idea. Again, most of us lower rated players would never ever play this. We wouldn't find this over the board, and even if we did, we would be afraid that our opponents would think we were smoking something we ought not to be, or maybe had one too many drinks before the tournament or the game. Giving up a rook hardly ever seems like a good idea, unless you have a guaranteed calculated sack line. Okay, then that's a great idea. But here, that's not so clear. So this is kind of a towel-like play in the game. Pawn takes knight. And this obviously is where black obviously is playing at a 3000 ELO level or beyond. It's Komodo 8. And most of us would be more concerned with getting that bishop out of there or taking the pawn back on f6. Well, black here has a crafty idea. By taking e3, he is hitting the rook, and also if this knight were to come away, then either one of these pawns could possibly be dropped. Well, not this one because you just take back, but this would be certainly a good resource with check and possibly some kind of tactics if black can get. But that's the problem. Black is out of pieces. All of these interesting ideas have pretty much left black out of pieces, except for his two heavy pieces and the one bishop, which right now is trapped in Timbuktu. At any rate, interesting line, f5. And now black finally takes the rook off on g1. Queen takes back on g1. Pawn takes f6. Knight up to f4. And now there's double weaknesses, triple weaknesses on g6. And if white can get some kind of idea of the queen to h6 or a rook to g1, it's going to start looking like curtains for black. So g5, what else? Locking the position temporarily. Bishop c3, rook a4, knight h5, king h8, bishop d2, rook a8, king g2. That's not an easy move to find, I think. h6. Now the queen trading places with the king on h2. That's the reason for that maneuver. Rook a4, knight g3, h5. Oh, that probably wasn't the best move for black to play, but honestly, what else? Queen takes h5, king g7, and of course rook h1. Black rook goes to h8. Guys, I'll give you 30 seconds. What's the money shot here? We're not going to give up the queen, certainly. Are we? Or are we? White takes, bishop takes g5. Are you kidding me? Rook takes queen. Knight takes h5 check. King f8. Knight takes f6. And the black king is very nearly in a cage of doom. Rook a8, a truly meaningless move. Rook h8 check. King g7, trying desperately for some type of last ditch idea in the position. Rook takes d8. Rook takes. And now what? Now what do we do? Knight h5 check. King f8. Bishop takes rook. b6. Bishop takes c7. f6. C takes b6. King f7. b7. King f8. b8. New queen. Hello. King f7. b6. King e7. Bishop d6 check. King over to f7. And queen f8 mate. That's mate in 49. A buck wild variation for sure. I call that the towel variation because it's extremely towel-like. Black played a little spastically. I thought traded too many pieces away for pawns, but definitely managed to muck up White's sort of insta attack. But White still found incredibly powerful attacking resources in that variation. So we'll briefly wrap it up with the main game that we looked at, the first variation, and then I will let you go until next time. So no more commentating, just enjoy the game, and we'll see you next time here on YouTube. Thanks so much, and best of luck in your chess endeavors and chess journey.